I've always believed that betrayal doesn't just crash through the door one day. It creeps in quietly. It starts with a glance held too long, a laugh that feels rehearsed, or a silence that says more than words ever could. And that night in Denver, at a corporate dinner meant to celebrate a big partnership deal, I felt the first crack in the foundation of my marriage. The venue was nothing short of pretentious. We were at the Grandstone Ballroom downtown, white tablecloths, crystal glasses, an open bar that somehow made everyone forget we were still colleagues. It was one of those evenings where people wore name tags, even though they all knew each other, and everyone laughed too loud at the senior VP's jokes. I was nursing my second glass of scotch, pretending to listen to a conversation about quarterly projections, when I saw her. Laura, my wife of 8 years. The woman I thought I knew better than anyone. She was standing near the bar in a sleeveless navy blue dress I hadn't seen before. Elegant, fitted, a little more revealing than her usual style. She looked confident. No, not just confident, deliberate, like she had dressed for attention. Her makeup was flawless, her smile wide and animated as she spoke to a man I didn't recognize. Tall, trim beard, that brand of business casual that screams, I lift, but I also read. I watched from a distance, not out of paranoia but something else. Something quieter and colder. It was the way she tilted her head, the way she leaned in closer than she needed to, and then there it was, her hand. It rested on his shoulder. Not a brief touch. Not one of those socially acceptable gestures you make when the music's too loud and the room's too crowded. No, this was deliberate. Slow. Mate. The kind of touch you reserve for someone you trust or someone you want to. My stomach tightened. They were laughing about something, their heads nearly touching. I tried to make out what they were saying, but the crowd between us made that impossible. So I just stood there, frozen, trying to convince myself that I was overreacting, that it was just a friendly moment between coworkers, that I wasn't seeing what I thought I was seeing. But then she spotted me. The shift in her face was immediate, almost theatrical. Her posture straightened, her smile flickered like a light bulb going out, and her hand dropped from his shoulder like she'd touched a hot stove. She gave the man a tight smile, said something quick, and then made her way toward me like an actress hitting her mark. There you are, she said, looping her arm through mine like she was reclaiming her territory. I was starting to think you ditched me. Her voice was just a touch too loud, the smile just a little too bright. She kissed my cheek, and I caught a whiff of her perfume. Something floral and unfamiliar. Who was that? I asked, keeping my tone even. Oh, just Tyler, she replied quickly, glancing back toward the man, who had already turned his attention to someone else. He's in product. I met him during the Q2 campaign rollout. That name meant nothing to me. I'd been with the company for 6 years, long enough to know most people by face if not by name, but I had never seen this guy before. She didn't offer more. Instead, she tightened her grip on my arm and steered me toward the dessert table like we were just another happy couple at a company gala. Like she hadn't just been wrapped up in a moment with another man she didn't think I'd see. And maybe that's what got to me the most. Not the touch, not the smile, but how smoothly she pivoted. How easily she slipped from that moment to this one. Like there was a mask she wore with him and another she put on for me. For the rest of the night, she was overly affectionate. Laughing at my jokes that weren't funny. Brushing her fingers down my sleeve whenever we passed someone she knew. At one point, she even introduced me to a VP I'd met 3 times before, acting like she was proud to show me off, like she was making a point. But I couldn't shake the way she looked with Tyler. I couldn't forget the hand on his shoulder, the way her smile reached her eyes when she spoke to him. Something it hadn't done with me in a while. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I was being insecure. But something deep inside me, the part that notices patterns, the part that remembers, started to stir. After dinner, while we mingled around the ballroom with overpriced champagne flutes in hand, Laura kept glancing toward the bar. Not often, just enough to be subtle. Enough to make me wonder if she was even aware she was doing it. At one point, she excused herself to say hi to a former coworker. I watched her walk away, heels clicking against the marble floor, weaving effortlessly through the crowd. She stopped by a group of people, made small talk, smiled politely. But it was obvious she was scanning the room for someone. And when her eyes finally landed on Tyler, leaning casually against the far wall, scrolling through his phone, her whole expression changed. She looked down quickly, brushed her hair behind her ear, and walked the other direction. It was smooth, innocent if you weren't paying attention. But I was. And once you start seeing the cracks, you can't unsee them. Every glance becomes suspicious. Every smile carries weight. Every unexplained moment starts to feel like evidence. I didn't confront her. What would I even say? Hey, Laura, your hand on that guy's shoulder made me feel like I don't know you anymore. I couldn't prove anything. It was a whisper of something wrong, not a shout. But I knew myself. I knew my instincts. That night, when we got back to the hotel, she was unusually quiet. She slipped out of her dress without looking at me and got into bed before I even finished brushing my teeth. When I finally crawled in beside her, I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the slow rhythm of her breathing. Was she asleep or pretending? I wanted to ask her, to say something, but I didn't. I just lay there in the dark, caught between suspicion and denial, between fear and the hope that I was wrong. But I wasn't, because looking back now, that moment in the ballroom was the first real sign. The first clue that something had shifted, that she was slipping away from me. Not in a sudden, dramatic way, but in inches, like sand falling through an open palm. And all I could do was watch it happen. I didn't say anything the morning after. Laura was already up by the time I opened my eyes, sitting on the little bench by the hotel window, scrolling through her phone with a mug of hotel coffee in her other hand. She didn't look up when I stirred. Just a faint mourning over her shoulder before going back to whatever she was looking at. Probably email, maybe Instagram, or maybe just nothing at all, just a screen to hide behind. We flew home that afternoon. The whole trip back was filled with the kind of silence that passes for normal after years of marriage. We talked logistics, who would grab groceries, what day the pest control guy was coming. We even joked about the airline food. But none of it felt like us. It was like we were actors reading off a script someone else wrote. But what really stuck with me, what I couldn't get out of my head, was that look on her face the night before, when she turned away from Tyler. That subtle shift. A moment too familiar. Like regret. I told myself I needed to let it go. That I couldn't build an entire case on a single interaction. But once the doubt settles in, it doesn't leave. It just sits there in the back of your mind like a splinter you can't reach, infecting everything. I started paying attention. Really paying attention. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. That marriage, especially this far in, has its ebbs and flows. But the more I watched, the more I started seeing patterns I had ignored before. For months now, Laura had been working late. Not once a week, not twice, 4 to 5 nights a week. It had started gradually, back when she got promoted to senior brand liaison. I had been proud of her, genuinely proud. She was finally getting the recognition she'd worked so hard for. The late nights, the certifications, the unpaid internships. I supported her through it all. But lately it felt off. I remembered one night a few weeks back when she texted me around 10:30 to say her team had spontaneously gone out to celebrate a successful launch. I didn't think much of it at the time. But now I was starting to ask questions I should have asked then. Why hadn't I seen any photos? Why did she come home smelling faintly of cologne she didn't wear herself? I used to surprise her with late-night takeout when she worked overtime. Thai food, her favorite. She always acted grateful, but at some point, she asked me to stop. "You don't have to do that anymore," she'd said, not unkindly. "I don't want you driving across town late just to feed me." I'd agreed. But now I wondered, was it about my safety? Or had she just not wanted me showing up unannounced? Then there were the off-calendar trips. Laura had always been organized to a fault, color-coded spreadsheets for everything from birthdays to car maintenance. But lately, she'd started mentioning last-minute training events or conferences that didn't appear anywhere in her shared calendar. She'd brush it off, say they were internal and nothing worth noting. Once, she left for what she called a networking retreat in Aspen. She didn't mention it until the day before. It came up last minute, she said, already half-packed. I wasn't even sure I was going until this morning. I'd kissed her goodbye that morning, watching as she rolled her sleek black carry-on down the driveway, promising to call me that evening. She didn't. When I texted her around 9 p.m. I got a quick, sorry, busy day, talk tomorrow? I said sure. She never called the next day either. Now, maybe I was just connecting dots that weren't meant to be connected. Maybe my imagination was filling in gaps with things I didn't want to face. But the signs weren't just in the absences. They were in the presence too, or lack of it. I started noticing how she pulled away when I tried to hold her. Not dramatically, just a subtle recoil before she'd ease into the embrace. She'd check her phone at night more often now, sometimes smiling at messages she didn't tell me about. If I asked who it was, she'd name someone from her team, always casually. Just Alicia. She's venting about a campaign. Or Chris from finance, something about the budget. But I never saw the messages. I never even saw the names light up on the screen. And when she started buying new clothes, things I didn't see her wear at home, I couldn't help but wonder who they were for. She said they were conference wear, but why would someone need to pack lace blouses and open-back dresses for a marketing summit? One evening, she came home wearing red lipstick. Laura never wore red. Not since our early 20s. That night, she said it was just for fun. And I wanted to believe her. But I noticed the way she wiped it off almost immediately after coming through the door. Then there were the smaller things. She'd stopped thanking me for the things she used to appreciate. I made her coffee in the mornings. She used to smile and kiss me on the cheek. Now, she'd sip it absently while answering emails. I'd ask her how her day went, and she'd just shrug. Same as always. She didn't ask about my day anymore. And when I'd try to tell her anyway, she'd nod along. But I could tell she wasn't listening. Her eyes always drifted back to her phone. One night, I brought up an old memory. Our first trip to Portland, when we got caught in the rain and ducked into that tiny bookstore. She barely reacted, just smiled weakly and said, "Yeah, that was nice," before turning the TV back up. It wasn't just that she seemed distant. It was that she seemed removed, like she was already living a different life, one she hadn't told me about. And the strangest part? There was no fight, no big blow-up, no shouting matches or slammed doors. Just a slow, quiet retreat. A woman I used to fall asleep next to every night now felt like a stranger sharing my home. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't cold. She was simply absent, even when she was sitting right next to me. And I started to wonder, had she planned it that way? Had she been withdrawing bit by bit so I wouldn't notice all at once? Was this some slow exit strategy disguised as career focus? I didn't want to accuse her. I didn't even want to think the word affair. But deep down, something had changed. She was no longer my partner. She was someone else entirely. Someone I had to learn to watch, not just love. One afternoon, I went into our office looking for a receipt I'd left in her drawer. I had a legitimate reason. But when I opened it, I found a hotel key card instead. One with the logo of a place we hadn't stayed at in years. She told me she'd been in back-to-back meetings that day. My hands trembled as I turned the card over, the hotel name embossed in gold. I didn't ask her about it. Not yet. Couldn't. I needed more. I needed clarity. Because if I was going to confront her, I had to be sure. Not just for her, but for me. For my own sanity. That night, she came home late again. Said the team had stayed after hours to work through a brand audit. I watched her pour a glass of wine and kick off her shoes. Like everything was fine. Like we were fine. She didn't notice me watching her. And for the first time in our marriage, I truly didn't recognize the woman in front of me. I used to think that discovering the truth would feel like relief. That if I could just know, really know, see it with my own eyes, then the confusion, the questions, the slow decay of trust would all vanish, replaced by certainty. Even if that certainty was painful, even if it ended everything. But when the moment finally came, when I stood in a hallway outside a conference room with my heart pounding and the air thick in my lungs, there was no relief, only silence, and the sound of something inside me breaking. It happened later that same night. The final night of the corporate event in Denver. After dinner, people had spread throughout the venue, drinks in hand, forming little pockets of laughter and networking and forced conversation. Laura had disappeared again, claiming she needed to speak with one of the vendors who'd helped coordinate the rollout campaign. Something about logistics for a follow-up conference next quarter. She said it casually, like I wasn't even listening. "I won't be long," she'd said, touching my arm without looking me in the eye. I nodded, pretending it was fine, pretending I believed her. But this time I followed. Not like a madman, not frantically or with rage in my chest. Just quietly, like someone walking toward the end of something and not entirely sure what comes after. I waited a few minutes, then left the bar, drifting through the corridor of the hotel's event floor, looking as if I were on my way to the restroom or stepping outside for air. And that's when I saw it. Down the hall, one of the conference rooms had been left cracked open just slightly, enough to let a strip of amber light spill onto the carpet. I wouldn't have even noticed it if I hadn't heard the sound of hushed voices. Not raised, not urgent, just low, familiar, close. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I didn't even mean to stop, but I did. I slowed my steps and stood just off to the side, out of sight of the open door. My breath caught as I heard her voice. "Laura." And then his, "Tyler." I didn't need to see anything to know. You can hear it in someone's tone. That softness that doesn't belong in a workplace. That warmth. That knowing. I told myself to walk away, that whatever was happening in there, I wasn't ready to face it yet. But then I heard a laugh. Hers. And it was the kind of laugh she hadn't shared with me in a long time. So I looked. Through the inch-wide opening in the door, I saw them. Laura was standing close to him. Too close. Her back was to me, but I could see the outline of her body as she leaned into him, her head tilted upward. His hand was at her waist. Not moving. Just there. Familiar. Possessive. And she didn't flinch. She didn't move away. She leaned closer. He said something quiet, something that made her smile. And then he brushed a strand of hair from her face. I saw her hand lift, her fingers grazing the lapel of his jacket. Then she placed her palm on his chest. Slowly, and mately, like this was something she had done before. Time stopped. I didn't burst in. I didn't yell. I didn't take a photo or throw a punch or demand answers. I just stood there, watching the woman I married touch another man like she used to touch me. That was it. That was the moment. Everything I tried to ignore. The long nights, the mysterious trips, the new wardrobe, the fading gratitude, the quiet in her eyes. All of it collapsed into a single scene no longer open to interpretation. They didn't kiss, but they didn't need to. That kind of closeness isn't born in a single night. It's grown in shadows, protected by lies, watered with excuses. This wasn't new. This was established, practiced. I backed away from the door. Slowly, carefully. My heart was pounding, but I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I wasn't anything, just hollow. I walked back down the hallway and returned to the main ballroom as if nothing had happened. The party was still going, though a little more subdued now. The jazz band had packed up, replaced by a Spotify playlist no one was paying attention to. Conversations were quieter. People were looser, sloppier. And yet, I felt like I was walking through a dream, like I had left my body behind and was just watching everything from above. Someone offered me another drink. I took it. Someone else asked where Laura had gone. I shrugged. When she came back 20 minutes later, she was smiling. Too much. That fake, overcompensating kind of smile that she thought I wouldn't notice. She slid her arm into mine like it hadn't just been wrapped around someone else. Her perfume was stronger than before, freshly reapplied. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. "Hey," she said, cheerful and breathy. "Sorry that took so long. Boring vendor stuff." I smiled back. No reaction. No accusation. Just that smile. Because I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. Not in front of her. Not in front of everyone. I sipped my drink and let her pretend. Let her play the part. We made rounds again. Talking to coworkers, smiling for photos, nodding along to conversations that I wasn't hearing. Every now and then, I'd catch her glancing around the room, probably looking for Tyler, or maybe looking to see if I'd seen. That's the thing about people who lie. They're not just watching you for trust, they're watching you for evidence. They want to know if you're catching on, if the walls are closing in. She knew I knew. I could feel it in the way her voice trembled ever so slightly when she said my name. The way she looked at me just a half-second too long before saying something meaningless about the dessert table. I didn't react. Not then. Not in that room filled with champagne glasses and congratulations and networking business cards. But something had shifted in me. And it wasn't just anger. It was resolve. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want drama. What I wanted, what I needed was truth, recognition, and the space to decide what to do next without being manipulated into staying silent. The most painful part? I didn't feel hate. I felt grief. Because in that one moment behind the conference room door, I didn't just witness infidelity. I witnessed the death of everything I tried to build. The long nights I'd spent working to keep us afloat while she chased her ambitions. The holidays I rearranged, the friends I distanced myself from, the job offers I turned down to stay close to her career. The years of being the supportive husband. Proud to be beside a strong woman, proud to be her partner, even when it meant standing in the background. All of that was gone now, because she hadn't just stepped out of the marriage. She had rewritten it, rewritten who we were, rewritten who I was in her story. And now, I was just a prop, placeholder, a man she kept around to maintain the image while she built a second life behind closed doors. Back at the hotel, I said little. We undressed in silence, got into bed, faced away from each other. I stared at the wall. She stared at her phone. And somewhere between the silence and the sheets, I made a decision. This wouldn't be buried. It wouldn't be swept under some rug of, we can fix this, or, it didn't mean anything, because it did mean something. It meant I wasn't crazy. It meant my instincts were right. It meant I was no longer the only person in this marriage telling the truth. And now that I had seen it, I couldn't unsee it. The question was no longer, is something going on? It was, what am I going to do about it? Some moments rewrite everything. They cut through the noise, through the politics and the small talk and the endless how's work, pleasantries, and leave only raw truth in their wake. Sometimes it doesn't happen in private. Sometimes it unfolds in a room full of people who never saw it coming. That was the kind of moment I was standing in. And for once, I wasn't going to pretend anymore. The ballroom had settled into its final rhythm. The band was gone. The lights were softer now. Dimmable chandeliers casting golden rings across the tables, flickering like candlelight. Conversations hummed in every corner. Laughter floated above half-empty wine glasses. People were tired, buzzed, full from catered steak dinners and compliments that didn't mean anything. Laura was beside me, her hand resting lightly on my arm, her smile surgically fixed to her face. You'd think we were the power couple everyone wanted to emulate. You'd think we were unshakable. If only they knew. I glanced toward the far corner of the room and saw Tyler again. He was laughing with a small group, drink in hand, completely unaware, or perhaps very aware, that I had seen them, that I had watched him touch what wasn't his, that I knew. He looked at me once, briefly, a glance, then back to his circle as if I didn't exist. It wasn't arrogance that hit me hardest. It was dismissal. In that moment, I realized something. Neither of them thought I'd do anything. They had operated in the safety of assumptions. That I would stay quiet. That I'd make peace with it behind closed doors. That I was too composed, too mild, too committed to maintaining appearances to ever make a scene. And maybe they were right until now, because something inside me had shifted in that hallway. Seeing them together, really seeing it, had broken something I hadn't even realized was fragile. My pride. Not ego. Not vanity. Pride. The quiet, internal kind. The kind that lets you look in the mirror and know who you are. And I wasn't going to stand there, play husband of the year, and hand them both the dignity they didn't earn. So I did something I never imagined I'd do. I stepped forward. At the front of the ballroom, An MC was wrapping up the evening, thanking the sponsors, congratulating the partnership heads. She was about to introduce the next speaker when I approached. "Excuse me," I said, touching her arm gently. "Mind if I say a few words?" She blinked, thrown off. Of course, Mr. Montgomery. Did you want to say something on behalf of—" "Yes," I said, "on behalf of myself." And then I took the microphone. The room went quiet almost instantly. That kind of silence you can feel in your chest. The kind where you know something's coming, but no one knows what. I looked out over the crowd. Faces I'd known for years. Partners, staff, executives, friends. And Laura, just off to the side, her smile faltering, one hand frozen in midair. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't shout anyone's name. I just told the truth. "I want to take a moment to thank you all." I began, my voice steady. "This has been an incredible night for the company, for our teams, and for everyone who helped make this event happen. But for me, it's been more than that." I paused. "My wife, Laura, and I have been together for nearly a decade. Many of you know us. You've seen us at these events. You've asked about our anniversary trips, our renovations, our family plans. We've always presented ourselves as a team." I heard a shuffle in the audience, chairs shifting, breaths being held. But the truth is, a team only works if both people are playing for the same side. Laura took a step forward. "Eric," she said quietly, too quietly for the mic to pick up. "What are you doing?" I didn't look at her. I've spent years supporting her career, years stepping back, letting her shine. And I never once asked for recognition, because that's what love is: quiet effort, sacrifice without applause. But at some point, support becomes invisible. And eventually, invisible becomes disposable. A few people murmured. Some of them looked at Laura now. Her face was still. Her mouth was slightly open, her eyes wide but unblinking. She looked like she wanted to run, but didn't know how to make it look like anything else. If a woman wants independence, she should have it. Every right to it. But tonight, I found out that what Laura has been presenting here, what she's told so many of you, isn't the full truth. Laura took another step toward the stage. "Eric, stop. This isn't the place." I finally looked at her. Our eyes met. Hers were filled with fury and something close to panic. "This is exactly the place," I said calmly. "You made choices behind closed doors. You created a version of yourself for this crowd. Tonight, I'm giving you what you claimed you wanted." I turned back to the mic. If she no longer considers herself married in private, she won't need to pretend in public. As of this moment, Laura is officially free. There's no need to keep up the performance. You've already left the stage, even if you thought no one noticed. I set the mic down gently. No slam. No dramatics, just silence, and then applause. Not a few claps out of obligation, not scattered politeness. A wave. It started from the back. A few uncertain hands, then more, then louder. Not for what I said, but for saying it. For refusing to be the man everyone pitted behind his back. For refusing to keep pretending. I walked off the stage and through the crowd. People parted like water. Some reached out. Claps on the shoulder, nods, murmurs of respect. Others looked at Laura, uncertain. The image she had built, sharp, successful, magnetic, was unraveling in front of their eyes. She wasn't angry. She wasn't crying. She just stood there, frozen. And for once, she had no words. Tyler? He had vanished. Of course he had. By the time I reached the doors, I turned once more. Looked back. Not at her. Not at the crowd. At myself. At the man I had been before I picked up that mic. And I knew I wasn't him anymore. Outside, the night was cold. Bracing. The air tasted clean, like something had finally been flushed out of my lungs. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel proud. I felt real. Seen. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I had chosen myself. The applause faded long before I pulled into our driveway. Even with the heater running, the car felt cold. Not the kind of chill you fix with a jacket, but the kind that seeps in when everything familiar starts to rot. The garage door creaked open slowly, and I sat there for a full minute, staring at the shadows on the far wall. Our bikes hung neatly on their racks. A half-empty bag of potting soil rested against the shelving unit where Laura used to keep her gardening gloves. All of it untouched, like our life had been put on pause months ago and nobody had the heart to press play again. Inside, the house was dark except for the dim glow of a single kitchen light. I didn't call her name. I didn't want to start another performance. I found her sitting at the kitchen table, still in her dress from the gala. One strap slipped off her shoulder. A half glass of red wine sat untouched in front of her. Her heels were gone, her posture stiff. The look in her eyes was something between rage and disbelief, as if she still hadn't decided whether to explode or apologize. She didn't say anything at first. Neither did I. I walked past her, opened the fridge, and grabbed a bottle of water. My throat was dry. My body felt drained, like I'd left all my energy back on that stage. I unscrewed the cap slowly, deliberately, and took a long drink before finally speaking. You humiliated me first, Laura. She blinked. You think what you did was justified? What I did was honest. Her lips tightened. You could have handled that privately. You didn't. She scoffed and stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the tile. Oh, give me a break. You made a spectacle out of something that wasn't even. Wasn't even what? I snapped, slamming the bottle onto the counter. Go ahead. Finish the sentence. She paused, her jaw clenched. It wasn't what it looked like. There it was. The classic line. The one everyone says when they've run out of lies but haven't yet figured out how to tell the truth. I saw you, Laura. I stood there in the hallway and watched you with him. The way you touched him. The way he looked at you. I took a step closer. There's no professional context for that. Her voice cracked. It wasn't physical. No, I said, my voice calm but razor sharp. You mean you just emotionally checked out of our marriage without telling me? That better? She folded her arms across her chest. I didn't plan this, Eric. No, of course not. Affairs just happen. Like traffic. Or bad weather. She looked away, biting the inside of her cheek the way she did when she was cornered. I leaned back against the counter, letting the silence hang between us. I gave up years of my life to support you, I said, and I never once made you feel small for it. Never once complained when I was the one keeping the lights on. You remember that first year you interned at that startup for free? You needed someone to believe in you. I did. She turned back toward me, eyes glassy but sharp. Don't do that. Don't act like I haven't supported you too. When? That stunned her. Just for a moment. Then she tried to reassemble herself. When you were working doubles at the firm. When you were pulling 12-hour days to meet deadlines. I was here. I kept things going. Laura, you were the thing I was working for. Her mouth opened, then shut again. And I think maybe that's when it hit her, really hit her, that we weren't just fighting about one night. We were fighting about everything. Every moment she had chipped away at the bond we used to have. Every time I'd made excuses for her absences. Every time she dismissed my concern as overthinking. This is about your ego, she said finally. You couldn't handle that I was rising faster than you. I laughed. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It was a hollow one, born out of the absurdity of the moment. Is that what you told yourself? That I was threatened by your success? You were. No, Laura. I was proud. God, I wanted you to succeed. I bragged about you more than I ever did about myself. But you know what I realized lately? You stopped doing the same for me. She shook her head. This is getting twisted. No, I said. This is finally getting clear. She reached for her wine and took a long sip, her hand trembling slightly. I watched her set it down too hard. A little splash hit the tablecloth. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said quietly. But you did. And neither of us said anything for a long time after that. Eventually, she took her glass and walked toward the stairs without looking back. I'm sleeping in the guest room, she said, her voice flat. Fine. The next morning, we barely spoke. She came downstairs already dressed for work, wearing that beige blazer I used to love before I knew how good it looked on her in someone else's eyes. She grabbed her keys and headed toward the door. I was sitting on the couch with my laptop, pretending to read emails. At the door, she hesitated. I don't know what happens next. I didn't look up. That makes two of us. Then she left. The silence that followed was different than before. This wasn't the heavy, unspoken kind that fills a marriage slowly. This was loud, cracking, final. I spent the rest of the day walking through our house like it was a crime scene. The framed photo from our trip to Mendocino. The painting she picked out from the art fair. Her coffee mug, the boss lady, resting upside down in the drying rack. It all felt fake, set designed, like props from a life we didn't actually live anymore. At one point, I opened her closet, just stared at it. Rows of neatly hung outfits. A drawer with stacked yoga pants and sports bras. I remembered how once, early in our relationship, I'd come home from work to find her asleep on the couch in one of my old sweatshirts, her head resting on a half-read book. I stood there for 5 minutes, maybe longer. Then I closed the door. That night, she didn't come home until after 10. I didn't ask where she'd been. She didn't offer. She went straight upstairs. I stayed downstairs and listened to the creak of the floorboards above me. Every step a reminder of how far apart we were, even in the same house. Around midnight, I finally climbed into bed, alone. I stared at the ceiling fan, watching it spin, thinking about everything we had been, everything we'd sacrificed. The years I'd said no to jobs in other cities so she wouldn't have to relocate. The loan I'd co-signed so she could get her MBA. The anniversary trip I canceled when her company had a last-minute retreat. The nights I stayed late at the office just to give her time alone because she said she needed space. I did all of it with love. She used all of it for leverage. And now here we were, two ghosts occupying the same square footage, haunting a life that didn't belong to us anymore. The next morning, I checked her shared calendar. It was blank.